A critic is a creature who has views quite like a camel's. Flowers and fruit he scorns. In the flower garden of the honeyed muse, he starves unless he finds a meal of thorns. Hello, and welcome to A Meal of Thorns, a critical book club from the Ancillary Review of Books. I'm Jake Casella-Brookins. We ask critics, scholars, reviewers, and more to walk us through a book, usually a speculative fiction book, and talk about what makes it work, what's interesting or thorny or productive about it. Today we are talking about Nnedi Okorafor's latest novel, Death of the Author, with Dr. André M. Carrington. André is a scholar of race, gender, and genre in Black and American cultural production. He is the author of Speculative Blackness, The Future of Race in Science Fiction, and the editor of the recently released The Black Fantastic, 20 Afrofuturist Stories from the Library of America. And he has a forthcoming book on radio adaptations of Black SF, Audio Futurism, that sounds very cool. He teaches at UC Riverside, which, listeners, if you don't know, is one of the major hubs of SF research. So I'm very excited to have him here today. André, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing?
I am doing all right. If I'm not looking at the big picture, I'm personally doing okay. The rest of the world, it is a hard time to do all right.
Yeah, big same, as they say. Before we get into today's book, I wanted to ask if there's anything else you have been reading or working on that's interesting.
Yeah, well, at UC Riverside, we just came off of our most recent in-person Eaton Conference on speculative fiction about 2 weeks ago now. It felt like it was such a long run up, and I can't believe it's been 2 weeks now, but it was really exciting. We had about 30 guest speakers in person, an amazing presentation of a speculative fiction opera on video that Malik Gaines and Sandro Segade produced, and just a wonderful couple days of conversation and scholarship, which was really exciting.
That's really cool. That's wonderful. I want to get back to the Eaton Conference sometime. It has been like a super long time.
I just finished reading To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara.
Oh, yeah.
Which was really, really cool. It took me a while to get into it, but then once I did, I realized, oh wow, I'm in for quite a journey. And it was pretty amazing. It was so affecting and beautiful and sad. It just took, like I said, such a journey. I felt like I experienced all the time that passed in it.
That's like set in like multiple time settings, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, there are these, what seems to be an alternate history past. There's an alternate or maybe imminent future with several pandemics to worry about. And the different timelines and different really generational experiences of the characters really take you on this tour of, what's possible and make you feel very invested in how things can go within your own family or within the country or the world.
I was working in a bookstore when that came out, and I remember everyone coming up and thunking it down. It was like as big as, I don't know, any other 4 books out there. It was very impressive.
Yeah, whenever I read an audiobook, that's the format in which I read it. Whenever I read an audiobook, I think of like, oh, okay, are there, 12 hours? That's a short read. Are there 20 some hours? Oh, that's a commitment. And it means really the difference between something you listen to during a commute or something you actually really set aside time for in that format. And this one I really had to make time for, and I'm glad I did.
Cool. No, that's very cool. I've not been reading anything quite that long. I just started, so I'm not very far into it. But Tochi Onyebuchi's book coming out here in a bit, Harmattan season.
Awesome.
Which I'm only like a couple chapters in, but I'm super into it. It's definitely, it has like a noir framing, which I think if you can handle right, you can pack so much cool stuff into that, like using that familiar format. And he's great. I've loved his previous stuff, so this is pretty cool. But yeah, let's get into talking about Death of the Author. So this is from Nnedi Okorafor. It was published just this January, 2025, by William Morrow. We'll probably get into genre questions about this one in discussion a little bit, But on first glance, it's not science fiction. Maybe also on third glance, but we'll come back to that. But it is about a science fiction writer. Zelu Onyedeli is an unpublished author who, after getting fired from her teaching gig for critiquing a student, quickly writes a science fiction novel called Rusted Robots, and that becomes an overnight success. The novel follows Zelu as she deals with fame and her family, and as she embraces futuristic assistive technology. And the book includes lengthy excerpts from Rusted Robots, the book within the book. For listeners who are not familiar with Okorafor, this is her 12th or so novel for adults. She has a lot of YA and younger books as well, and she's won a huge number of awards, Hugo's, Nebula's, World Fantasies, Nama's, more, lots of best-selling stuff. So yeah, she's a prolific, very, very well-known author in the current scene. Before we get into this one, I do want to do something kind of unusual for this podcast. I want to put a really big spoiler warning on this episode. So this book is still pretty new, and I don't think we can discuss it at depth without getting into some major twists and developments that happen in the back half. So if you are worried about spoilers for this one, read it and come back. I'm not going to rush to spoil it, but I'm sure it'll come up. But yeah, tell me about your experience with this book. You'd suggested this, and I'm very curious what you thought of it.
Yeah, I really dug it. I felt like in the course of reading it, I was sort of living in the present as it is and seeing this fictitious author come to prominence and paying attention to like the spectacle around them and everything, but getting a kind of insight into what they wrote that is really rare because of the book within the book. It really took turns and kind of sat you down with this author as, you know, like the title gives away. We can't take seriously that, oh, this author is a real person because they're a character. But then the author's also, you know, external to Okorafor herself, of course. And getting into this imaginary internal world of this writer who's creating this kind of thing that goes on to live in the world without her in ways that she didn't imagine. It was rare. It is rare for me to spend the time reading as much current fiction as I have in, say, the past like 2 years or so. Most of my time as a professor, I'm, you know, teaching students about the past couple hundred years of African American literature, or teaching them, you know, here's how we approach literature and media. But really getting to spend time with current work like this, I'm really glad this was it, because it gave me this sense of what it might be like for an author different from Okorafor, but living in a world that's similar to ours to deal with creating speculative fiction.
Did you, am I remembering correctly that you said you have worked with this in the classroom?
I'm about to.
Okay.
In 2 weeks from today, whenever the podcast comes out, it might have already happened in the past, but like 2 weeks from now, one of my courses is going to be reading this book.
Yeah, I'm always curious how these things play out in a classroom setting.
Me too.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, this book was really fascinating. I have to confess, I do a lot better with books when I have time to like sit and digest them for a while. And my schedule blew up and I didn't finish this until like a day ago. So I haven't had quite as much time to let it sit and kind of percolate. One of the things I don't know what to make of this book yet. There's a couple things about this that I'm really sitting like, what's going on with that? But one of the things that was really striking me the most was this book has two kind of really prominent things in it. One is, I don't want to call it like a wish fulfillment fantasy, but like I don't know quite the right word, like a success fantasy, right? Where it's like this unpublished author whose first book which is like a definite science fiction book with robots and stuff, gets a multi-million-dollar deal, gets an immediate adaptation made. Throughout the book, once the book within the book is out, almost every chapter there are like people like rushing up to the main character to try to get her autograph, you know, to just say how great it is. And I don't totally know what to make of it, just because it's so extreme that I almost wonder like what Okorafor is doing with it, right? There's a lot of ways that this main character, I think pretty obviously, has parallels with Okorafor. Isn't exactly, but has a lot of parallels. But this is not like, Okorafor's arc is like one of like working and like putting out more stuff and putting out lots of books and like gathering like ever more awards and bestsellers. It's sort of like not like a slow rise to fame, right? Like I think her early work took off pretty quickly. But this is just like this huge level of success, like right off the bat. In this way that is like I'm not saying this uncharitably, I hope, but like it is almost literally unbelievable. So it makes me
Yeah.
wonder what it's doing. So that's kind of one thing I was wondering about. And the other thing, again, this is just me kind of processing it. I'm not totally sure what to make of the kind of like the toxicity of the people around the main character. At least
Yeah.
that's the way I was reading it. And specifically, like, we can talk about more things, but so this character was paralyzed when she was, I think, 12 or so.
Right.
And then after the success of this novel, this like MIT professor, TED Talk kind of medical robotics guy reaches out and helps her get these experimental exoskeleton things that go on her legs that allow her to walk again, which is very cool. But then her family like freaks out at her about that and are like
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
mad at her like
Yeah.
immediately. And I just can't quite parse that. And I'm sure there are families that would do this, but I just couldn't wrap my head around, if I had a child who was paralyzed or if I was paralyzed, my parents reacting to me being able to walk again after 20 years with like shock and horror and being mad at me.
Sure.
And there are a couple other parts of the book where like right alongside this like incredible success fantasy of just like how wealthy and famous you are, people just kind of like attacking her like in these really extreme ways. And so those two kind of like tensions were going on a lot. And I don't yet know quite what to make of it.
Yeah, I still don't know what to make of it. Certainly. I've had maybe just like a month more
Mm,
after finishing it. Basically, as soon as I finished it, I thought, oh, I should really teach this because it's current.
mm,
And I still don't know what to make of it, and I'm excited to really experience it with students. That's why I thought it would be a nice thorny read, a nice thorny
mm-hmm,
suggestion, because we don't know how this book lives in the world except for each of us as readers. For me, I found that the intensity of the onset of Zelu's success was a really good sort of imaginary landscape to see. The thing about wish fulfillment is, right, be careful what you wish for,
mm-hmm,
because it was as if, all of the things that this writer, when we meet her in the beginning of the novel, she's struggling, she's teaching and making no money, she's experiencing the insecurity and the precarity that comes with that is just the day-to-day life of so many writers. But the way that the success happens, right? Not overnight, but the way that the risk, right? The scale of the risk that she takes on by actually getting the novel published, right? For most writers, of course, it goes out into the world, or any individual thing that you put in the world, sinks or rises to the top. But the way that it explodes is I think very much the be careful what you wish for element. And in that way it gives us a kind of a parable about what success means and what
mm,
having the things you desire or you imagine will be the return on your investment could mean. I love how incredible it is, like in the classic sense. Like it's hard to believe, but then again, it is exactly, I think, when you're as far away from creating something that makes an impact in the world the way that, somebody's breakthrough novel is.
mm-hmm.
Often, of course, in real life, it's not the first thing that they've published. But once it arrives and they become a household name, the fantasy of what it means for them to be successful looks very much like what happens to Zelu, right? And I feel like, oh, the way that people see her in the world is very much the way that people see writers whose work makes a splash like this.
Mm,
And they don't see and don't imagine that there is a deeper record of work, a lifetime of struggle and adversity, a day in, day out mindset that says, wow, this might never go anywhere, even a couple of failures to launch or a couple of small victories along the way. I think that when we see somebody explode into stardom that way, usually that crossover success and that big mainstream success takes a form as if it's what happens to Zelu in this novel.
mm.
And that piece of it really makes me think, oh my gosh, what are the lives of so many of these writers like, whom I know right now, but whose histories and internal lives and backgrounds I really don't.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. It's funny. As I was reading this, so there's a long running bit in the book after she publishes the first novel, of, I think like the contract is she's supposed to write the second one in a year or something
Yeah,
like that, which is
yeah,
like, I know people do that, but like, but she doesn't. And this ongoing thing of like seeing bits of the fandom feeling like they're owed the next
oh my
thing and kind
gosh.
of dealing with that, which is a terrible thing. I mean, I think that's been probably most famous with in the writing world, probably with the.
Yeah, with the Game of Thrones stuff, with the Song of Ice and Fire.
But I also know, like, I have seen that around all kind of works out there of just like,
Right,
whether, even just on like Goodreads or whatever, where people are like, "Where's the next one? Where's the next one?" for like every
right.
series out there. So I was going through it, and I was like, she's having kind of all these adventures. She's traveling. She's dealing with family and interpersonal stuff. And I kept being like, "Are you writing anything at all?" But then it actually reveals towards the end. She's like, "Oh yeah, she's not been writing the next novel, but she's been journaling and working on short stories, and like she is still a working writer, but it is kind of like hidden for most of the book. It's kind of like she kind of just like bangs out this rusted robots right in the beginning, and then we don't see her writing again until like towards the end.
Yeah, yeah, there's a bit of that unreliable narrator in it where like you don't know what she has tried to write before this novel. And I also felt like I don't know what the novel is like before I get to see it in the
Mm-hmm.
book within the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much of it is, the individual stories of the central characters in the internal novel. I don't know what how they developed and how they took shape. But I did see like, oh wow, so much of this is happening in spite of, other pressures and other demands. And so much of it is this intense personal commitment that Zelu can only take on because in like the way that other people see, it appears that her job and her career have failed, that they've fallen
Mm-hmm.
through, that she loses this job that is a lifeline. And seeing that that turns into this apparent like, where did this incredible novel come from? It came out of nowhere. Seeing that and seeing on the other side of it, of course, all people expect is that whoever writes things like that just writes things like that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw the immediacy and the intensity of the demand for a sequel, I thought, oh wow, this is this is directly what a George R. R. Martin means in the world
Mm-hmm.
right now today. I personally make those jokes all the time about George R. R. Martin, and this novel really checks in with us as readers. Like, are we okay? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I look at like how Martin's life has transformed so drastically, where like the notion of being a writer is nothing like what it was
Mm-hmm.
before, a big TV show. And
Right.
the notion that like, oh, you write a book and then you can write another related book, the idea that of the things that can happen to you after that are like you can make a TV show, you can make more TV shows, you can make video games. None of that is on the map at the time when you're writing one fair to middling successful novel and then
Yeah.
write another one.
Right.
But then once that one is so successful that you can do literally anything else, and in the case of somebody who's as successful as Martin, or as Okorafor now, or as I think N.K. Jemisin probably
Yeah.
experiences a lot of this,
Mm-hmm.
once you're successful enough to see that the sky's the limit, it really changes any it changes the place of that internal motivation to write the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes that next thing this fantasy object. And I think, oh my gosh, what do I, as a person who subscribes to HBO and watches this TV show and has not read a whole Song of Ice and Fire novel, what do I expect from another novel that I can just casually say, yeah, what's that guy even doing? And I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
wow, he's spending that money. He really is spending that money. And I think of what Zelu is like within the novel, seeing what her life looks like once Rusted Robots is successful, it really makes me see, oh yeah, the most realistic thing is that people will demand the sequel. Of
Mm-hmm.
course they will. Especially it gets adapted, and if you're gonna have work that's successful in Hollywood, Hollywood only wants, fantasy and speculative properties that have this long shelf life that can
Right.
rope actors into multi-movie deals for
Mm-hmm.
years. And I think, oh my gosh, that's the most realistic thing. And it's
Mm.
also the thing that we do in real life that's most unrealistic to expect from writers.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking through this like within the world of the story. how sad it is that Zelo has achieved fame kind of like alone. Because
Yeah,
most of the writers I know are in this kind of community, and often there for a really long time, and
yeah,
they have writers groups, and they know they have professors, they have students, they have magazine editors that they work with, they have other writers that they see at conferences and things, and like there's this kind of community, and then you get people who do get kind of like escape containment, I could say, right? Like,
right.
like Jemisin, like Martin, where all of a sudden, like, they are clearly like a much wider audience is reading them and engaging with their work. And yeah, they have this sort of like pipeline to multimedia adaptations kind of forever. And it just feels so different. And Zelu is just there like totally alone. Like, I don't think we see any other writers in this book. Like she has like her nameless agent,
Yeah,
but who, by the way, good job getting the money, but like really should have like done like some like social media work for her. Should have like
yeah.
run a little interference.
Yeah, yeah, that sense of isolation is really incredible too. It's kind of the myth of the genius is
Hmm.
like that, is that it sets us up to say like, oh, well, if the writing is really, really good, if the individual writer is really, really a genius, right? Won't they just
Yeah.
create the greatest thing since sliced bread and not need anyone?
Mm-hmm.
And what's striking is like a thing that I think that you see throughout amongst the other characters in the protagonist's life is that she's not alone, but she's alone as a writer, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
living this lonely artist genius life on this one level, but that's not fully who she is, right? Her success as a writer is such an exception to what everyone else in her life expects from her,
Mm-hmm.
so that everyone around her has this really strong notion of what their relationship to her is and what kind of a person they expect her to be, and doesn't seem to really understand how much of a difference in her life, like they see that publishing this novel and then the success it has in media makes her life different, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't really relate to like, oh my gosh, is this not the person we've always thought? Is this a
Mm-hmm.
person from whom we can no longer expect the things
Mm-hmm.
we've always expected? And seeing her do that lonely genius thing on the one hand, but also be surrounded and at times really pulled apart by the people in her life who hold her so closely.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the main antagonism of the novel, I felt, was the people who love and care for her and whom she loves and cares for. They can't see what she's going through as like the cost of that success.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, so on the one hand, yeah, 100% seeing that and thinking about like at a much smaller level, I have not achieved fame or financial success in like the things I do, but the way that I don't know if you've maybe experienced this in academic endeavors where you have a lot of people in your life who just don't understand what that is, right? And so
Yeah.
like you have to kind of like try to explain it to your to your grandmother or whatever, or to someone in your life you haven't seen in a long time. This podcast just got nominated for the Hugos, which feels very
Oh,
cool.
sweet. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
thank you. Yeah, it feels very cool, but it's one of those things where like people either get it and say, "Oh, cool, fantastic," or you have to like spend
Yeah.
10 minutes being like, "Okay, so in 1953, the world science fiction," like you have to like go through this
Yeah.
whole thing and explain it. So on that sense, like the fact that in Zelu's family, there's nobody else who's a writer. There's nobody else who's like kind of in this sort of artist scene that they don't have a way to kind of frame that success. That you're right. That does feel like the primary antagonist. Them not getting her. But again, I keep throughout this book, I was really struggling because it just kept feeling so unbelievable. That I'm wondering what the novel's doing. When people are like running up to her on the street. Granted, it's in Chicago. Chicago's a very literary town, so okay, maybe I'll give it a
Yeah.
pass. But it has this level of before her book is published, she has 200,000 followers on Instagram and just has like this sort of like millions of dollars being thrown at her for this book.
I think it's inviting us and really demanding that we call into question what we think success looks like and
Hmm.
what we think happens to people when they experience it, and like who we think goes through the struggles or overcomes the challenges we associate with being the genius or the lonely artist, or the artist who experiences disability and whose material success and even like choices in life and opportunities in life change the meaning of their
Hmm.
capacities the way that Zelus do with the
Mm-hmm.
prosthetics. Like all those things are thrown totally into disarray by
Mm-hmm.
what happens in this novel. It's wild to me that the believability is a challenge for you at all, because I think like when we read stuff that's perfectly unbelievable and implausible all the time. Like there are a lot of there's a lot to be said for how unbelievable, monopoly capitalism makes a lot
Mm.
of day-to-day life things,
Mm.
how unattainable like certain things like community and security and privacy and comfort are for so many people in, the material reality we live through. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a big challenge. But, I mean, I can believe that the flying space robots go into the sun in the novel within the novel. So I have no problem believing that somebody. I have no idea why anyone has hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers, but I don't. So I have no problem believing that stuff. I take it as it comes because it's so much more grounded and it's so much more like psychologically and physically easier to perceive than it is the stuff that takes a lot more, fanciful figurative language to portray when it
Mm.
comes to the, the disembodied AIs
Mm-hmm.
and flying robots and stuff. So I find that part like it's unlikely, but so is the likelihood of the success of each and everything that Okorafor has published.
Mm-hmm.
They add up to, a similarly improbable kind of
Mm-hmm.
success. In the novel, it all happens at once.
Mm-hmm.
That's dramatic.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Again, that was one of those trying to figure out what the book was trying to make me question, not question, was one that was on my mind like almost every chapter. Especially because, and we should talk maybe a little bit more about the novel within the novel.
Yeah.
So, writing about ekphrastic objects, about some kind of art within the book, that's always a weird challenge, right?
Yeah.
Because whether it's or if it's a song or a movie or whatever it is, when you have something secondary in the work that is like supposed to be so good, it's like, well, how do you portray that? And most books that I've encountered do this by not putting it right on the page, right? So
Right.
we just recorded an episode about I don't know if you know the Lost Book of Adana Moreau, Michael Zapata's book.
I don't know it.
Oh, it's really good. Also Chicago, like quasi science fiction, like adjacent book, but it's about this book that this woman wrote in the, I want to say, the 20s in New Orleans,
Uh-huh.
and like made a big splash in the science fiction world, but then she died young after writing a second novel that no one got to read. And so the whole book is sort of about that second book, but you never get it directly. You get people kind of
Uh-huh.
like tell you kind of what it was about. And I feel like that's a more common strategy, where I'm thinking of like, if you do put the thing in front of the viewer or the reader, you have to find a way to sell it. Like I'm thinking about maybe it's really hard to make a movie about a fake band without actually having like a
Yeah.
couple good bangers, right?
Right, right.
Like I don't know, like That Thing You Do or something. That's catchy. So like, okay, I can
Yeah.
see how this could be a one-hit wonder band. But this book, I don't know by percentage, but it's a good chunk of it is Rusted Robots, and it's definitely like not the whole thing, but you're sort of moving through it, kind of like a parallel chronology, right? Like you're sort of getting pieces of it as it goes on.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that you get it, that you get some of it, and even
Mm-hmm.
that you get what are really important parts of it within this novel, it's striking because it kind of takes it out of that place of an imaginary work of art within the text, because
Yeah.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
any more imaginary than the rest of the text, but we can live with like, oh, okay, so this author, an author is a kind of person, this person has this disability, and then they obtain this particular technology that hasn't been invented yet but could be, and it happens. I'm like, oh, okay, okay, I can sort of see all this stuff. But like the far future, the degree of difference between the world we live in and the one imagined in Rusted Robots, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's like that's the thing inside of the book that the book is trying to show me is further away, but it shows me so much of it that it ends up bringing it closer. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have the distance to use to put it in perspective anymore. And I really, I the thing that I kind of sit with uncomfortably is the going into the sun fantasy. That's
Mm-hmm.
really cool because it's
Mm-hmm.
because because you can only handle it as a reader as like, oh, that sounds really cool. It sounds like an idea that if I have the same idea, and if you tell me you have a dream of going into the sun, that I kind of know you mean it figuratively, but if you mean it literally, you're speaking science fiction language.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it happens in this imaginative way for the protagonist, that she imagines this, that she dreams of doing this as like, oh, the ultimate goal would not just be, do I obtain a technology that enables me to walk the way that other people walk? It's a fantasy that becomes a reality. It's a goal, it's a possibility that she says yes to. And like, could going into space or making a movie out of the work you publish be a fantasy that you might attain or might pursue? They're fantasies that get fulfilled. But going into the sun, I'm like, whoa, hold up. Going into the
Mm-hmm.
sun, that belongs in the science fiction part of the science fiction. But the way that that occupies this provocative space that you actually get to realize to some degree through how much of the novel is actually present within the book.
Mm.
Um, I really like that because it changes how I can even relate to the like, well, what the hell is somebody talking about when they say like going into the sun or like
Mm-hmm.
touching the stars? It sounds like something that robots might have the faculties to conceive of
Mm-hmm.
as like, oh, it's just a thing that is the next step. Whereas as a human, as a physical being in the real world, I'm like, oh no, I can't fantasize about that. But maybe if I were a robot, I could fantasize about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some clever, tricky work that I can't quite get my head around.
So for listeners who haven't read this or haven't read it in a while, the in the post-apocalyptic robot future of the novel within the novel, there are these robots who are out in space who can travel around, and they discover this new metal that they can like make new bodies out of, and it lets them go into the sun, which is cool. But then they are infected, go almost like sort of like religiously mad. I don't know how to say it
Yeah,
right. Yeah. And are going to come back and destroy the earth. And they're singing, right? They're all singing this song.
yeah,
It is of such a different sort of tenor than everything else in the novel within the novel that it really haunts me a little bit. And it sticks out as this very strange, weird thing. And they're like characters, like the main robot protagonist even says like this is kind of analogous to like climate change. It's kind of analogous to
yeah.
like these big giant problems in the background that we should probably be focusing on. But it's also so I don't know, weird and evocative to think of these people who were once your friends, and now they're very far away in space, but they're coming back and they're singing and they're going to destroy you when you get there. That's a weird image to hang it on. I dig that.
Yeah, it is. It's both like it's this horizon that is far beyond, what the most grounded and realistic characters in the novel have in mind. That's also like characters within the novel are like, oh, okay, I kind of see what you're talking about, but you can't possibly mean that literally.
Mm-hmm.
But they're saying it within the novel because they know, like, oh, okay, having a physical body that is entirely machine and also having consciousness is not a thing that, we as readers who are biological entities in the world can really relate to, but we're very familiar with how to read stories about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the notion that, oh, okay, so if you can imagine that that other kind of person who is so unlike you really couldn't possibly be them, that they have an internal world too. And in their internal world, there's something beyond their senses and beyond their ability to imagine and figure and represent. And they're actively struggling with it, like they're in an existential conflict
Mm-hmm.
with it. In a way, I like that because it's it's one of the sort of big ideas. It's an Olaf Stapledon kind of science fictional
Yeah,
idea,
totally.
like
Mm-hmm.
a epic deep time
Mm-hmm.
far future unimaginable scale idea.
Mm-hmm.
But when it occurs in the form of a conflict, right? It's not just, and then in deep time, maybe eventually the universe will tend toward this being the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
But to put it on a level where characters are, subjectively trying to reckon with it and actively struggling to say, like, I don't understand this. Like, what does this mean? What do we do about it? It brings those different levels closer together in a way that you're right. It kind of messes with the notion of what kind of a book am I reading?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of a story is this within the story?
So the story within the story starts out in this very, I don't know, you can picture it, right? Like we've seen robotic stuff, we've seen post-apocalyptic stuff.
Yeah.
Like it all kind of tracks. And it's not like overly cutesy, but I was like thinking of Wall-E a little bit or something like that, Becky Chambers books, But then it starts getting stranger and stranger and feeling less and less like a clear-cut science fiction book, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like it's not like evoking some particular fairy tale, but it's working in this more mythic sense, which I think connects to that kind of like deep time Stapledon-y kind of big thing.
Yeah.
Where it's less about like how does programming work, right? How to robot, CPU units work. It's less about that and more about opening up this space where bigger, weirder things can happen with these sort of post-human. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I spent so long banging my head off trying to decide if the robots being called Humes is just they're human-like, or if like I should be thinking about David Hume or not. I was banging my head off the wall trying to decide how Humean to get about it.
I tried not to. I saw it once and I was like, I don't
Uh-huh.
think so. Or at
Uh-huh.
least I don't think I need to, so I'm not
hmm
gonna. Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a blatantly signposted philosophy reference, so I was immediately fell into that. Not to jump too far, but just thinking about like other things in the book that were kind of like left hanging in a way that I'm
Yeah.
really pondering is so the book is called The Death of the Author, which obviously makes you think of Barth, but it might not be that. It could be a literal death of the author. It could be some other interpretation. The book is structured around a future event that we don't get. So there's these interview sections that are interjected. So we get the interjections that are Rusted Robots, but we also get these interjections from that journalist that she talks
Yeah.
to, who also
Yeah.
talks to like other people in her family and stuff. And they are all referenced as though they are written much later after something,
Right.
pointing towards like her, and like it's never spelled out, but like either her dying or her doing some kind of extreme thing that's like very bad or traumatic or disastrous or something. And you don't get what that is within the book. It's this odd openness. Like she does this extreme thing at the end, right? Like she goes to space, that's a big deal. But that doesn't feel like what it's pointing towards. And it just, those interview sections just stop at a certain point and it's just kind of left there. And I'm really curious about it. I don't have anything I think intelligent to say about it, but leaving that sort of intentional openness in it. This book, Death of the Author, to me doesn't feel like a book that necessarily like wants or needs a sequel. Like I'm sure it could, but it feels pretty complete. Kind of feels like it does a thing.
Yeah.
But then it leaves all of these kind of open lines pointing out. That's
Yeah.
just one of the things I've been pondering.
Yeah. Yeah. There are like these right, there are these features of the book structurally that are like internal corridors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like you get to one part of that perspective on the imagined set of events through a particular kind of discourse within the book. But then you have to come out of it and then see what happens next. And maybe you go back and maybe you don't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I felt about, the will she go to space and what's at stake and will she survive and what's the risk. I felt like I was learning about that and even learning like whether it would happen and whether I would read about it in part from the other characters
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways from like, oh, do I have to read enough of Rusted Robots to get that as a kind of payoff or like a
Mm.
convergence point or something? And
Mm-hmm.
that was not clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I really kind of dug that because it was like, oh yeah, there's no neat architecture, right? Within
Mm-hmm.
which, you take the east staircase, through the interviews
Yeah.
with this family member
Mm-hmm.
to get to this part of what happens. And then you take the basement, which is the narrative within the
Mm-hmm.
novel to get to this other part of like, oh, does the future of the world we live in as readers eventually meet up with the future that Rusted Robots is set in
Mm-hmm.
was a question I asked myself. And I thought, oh, no, 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 it's not like that. But then again,
Mm-hmm.
the way that the technology that that the author lives through within the text, the way that it progresses leads me to think, oh, okay, it is kind of about that. It's kind of about, okay, well, what if we're not living in this moment where this technology seems very close to us, but we're
Mm-hmm.
living in the moment that comes immediately afterward?
Mm-hmm.
You know? I liked that sense of not dead ends, but like they're exactly not dead ends. They're like these
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
open corridors within
Mm-hmm.
the book that lead you to other things and make you question, oh, okay, now that I see what this person who seems to have a perspective of a beginning, middle, and end that I don't yet have,
Mm-hmm.
now that I see that, I wonder what they know that I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something doing to invest any character with that responsibility to differentiate narrators from each other. And it's even stranger, I think, to really question like, oh, do I care about what they have to say because they care for Zelu, or do I
Right.
care about what they have to say because I believe some things they believe about Zelu and her
Mm-hmm.
choices in life that are not very sympathetic to her, that are clearly at odds with what she wants for herself? And I'm like, oh damn, like what is my job as a
Mm-hmm.
reader, and like what is the narrator's job to tell me?
We have to talk about the very, very ending, right? With the meta level twist to this,
Yeah.
right? The ultimate plot spoiler. Or is it a spoiler, or is that in the book that Zelu wrote? Right? There's this sort of like figure eight kind of Ouroboros thing with Ankara writing Death of the Author, in which Zelu writes Rusted Robots, in which Ankara writes Death of the, right? Like kind of looping around and around, which is formally fun.
There's a way that storytelling is this and memory is this power that clearly matters in every world depicted within the novel, and
Mm.
like being a storyteller and having an investment in it and having an investment with memory and relating it through stories seems like this, for lack of a better term, like human
Mm-hmm.
capacity that of
Yeah.
course troubles the robots, right? That it's deeply problematic for robots to be invested in doing this kind of thing that makes you human. But it seems so key that Ankara's ability to remember the human world and its past, and to remember that storytelling is this thing that humans do, it seems really defining. And it seems like calling into question the author's ability to really be separate from how we know them, right? How we
Mm.
know them through storytelling. That's going on, and is really, it's strongly signposted in the beginning of the book, right? When Zelu is teaching, and students are bringing up, well, here's theoretically how we understand this. So the way that we tell stories doesn't matter, and you really can't
Mm.
evaluate if they're good or not at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. Seeing that be like the consequential thing, the determining thing about Ankara's, consciousness and viability as a form of life, and the possibility that life on Earth, biological or machine based, even has a future. I think it's powerful to bring that down to the terrain of storytelling and memory, because it's this thing that the characters who are best equipped to do it in the novel, they don't get a pass for me, but they do get they get an interest. Like I want to
Mm.
know why it's important to them to be storytellers, why they defend it against people and other entities who feel like it's not important.
Mm. Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I was really grappling a lot with what story is doing in Rusted Robots, because they are all telling stories.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out like what do they mean? We can't tell stories, right? Because like they are recording narratives and sharing them with each other, and they have theories of mind, and they
Yeah.
lie, they deceive each other. They're telling stories, but they keep saying like we can't tell stories, we can't tell stories. Having again that kind of like not fairy tale, but kind of like mythic level of like
Yeah.
when Ankara crafts the story, that is part of not the entirety of, but like part of the solution to the whole problem, right? Is this kind of spreading and restoring something to the chargers that are coming to destroy. And it's especially so odd again because in Zelu's narrative, the storytelling in a lot of ways is kind of, I don't know how to say this. It's kind of bracketed, It's
Yeah.
kind of like, it's almost kind of like done, like the main thing is kind of done. And then we only very slowly start piecing together kind of like her relationship to what it is. I think like we see big flashes of it when it gets adapted and we see that they've kind of
Yeah.
mangled her vision. And then we get, at the end, we find out, like, oh, like what the next thing is sort of coming to her. Yeah, I have not contributed anything except questions to this idea of stories, but
It's really great though to be in a place where it keeps provoking questions, because it, in a way, I feel like it lets the reading continue, right? Because I'm still
mm,
thinking about, like, wait, what does it mean that she kind of makes peace with the adaptation after a while,
mm,
and what does it mean that that the robots of various kinds sort of learn, like, they kind of mourn humanity passing away. That seems really important to their interest in what the Chargers are coming to do,
mm-hmm,
right? That of course there are stakes for them, because they don't view the trajectory that the Chargers see for all life or all machine life being identical to what happened to humans, right? They don't see it as like, oh, this is great. Will
right,
transcend and be the next kind of thing. But instead, they are in this place because they remember humanity and our propensity for storytelling, and our inability, right, to perceive things the way that they can, as like precious, as like,
mm-hmm,
as worth remembering, if not worth returning to in any
mm-hmm,
sense. That I think is meant to be kind of humbling. It's meant to be
mm-hmm,
kind of like, to orient me as a reader. It orients me back to a big picture in which I'm wondering, is a future in which machines remember all the literature humans have ever written desirable or undesirable? And,
mm,
like, is it one
mm,
where it's worthwhile living all the human lives and telling stories and enjoying fiction if it's ultimately going to be treated in a way that, our ability to store information makes trivial?
mm-hmm,
And I feel like for Ankara, it's clearly not. It's
right,
really
yeah,
important. And
mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, yeah, that. I want that. But I also feel like I don't know if I can get to that, because I don't know if we live in that way in the world
Mm.
now.
There's this interesting thing, and I don't know if I've drawn this connection enough to make these threads, but between the importance of stories and storytelling and story hearing
Mm-hmm.
with the robots, and with this sort of not like hyper explicit, but this embrace of bodiness, of physicality, like not in
Yeah.
this essentialist way, in this like embrace of like it changes, right? Like
Yeah.
and Kara's legs get replaced, bits of their body get replaced, bits of a jelly like totally changes the kind of physical life they lead.
Yeah.
But this embrace of like of being in a place and this sort of rejection of just sort of like being this like bodiless, floating, disembodied, homeless thing that is sort of like
Yeah. It seemed like having a body at all was important, right?
mm-hmm,
And dealing with it seems like a constant preoccupation for all the characters, in a way that, like, it kind of makes Ijele perceptible as a character,
mm-hmm,
that, because she has to be associated with anyone's body, it's not so much that it matters whose, except that whoever, in the case of Ankara, the relationship that someone whose body it is has to somebody who
mm-hmm,
otherwise doesn't exist within a body is really consequential. And that's like, it's very present in the lives of the human real world characters in the book. It's really salient for Zelu and for people around her. And I feel like there is this tension that Zelu's always encountering around, I think, like, the problem that she has to live with that no one else does, right? That her body is her own, and that
mm-hmm,
she's the one who ultimately lives with it however it works.
mm-hmm,
Everyone has this profound interest in it,
mm-hmm,
and I don't think it is. I think that it happens in culturally specific ways, and I think that it
mm,
happens in ways that are specific to, like, the meaning of kinship and the meaning of a romantic relationship for the
mm-hmm,
characters of the novel. That people's interest in, who you are as a person and how you live in relation to them as a person is so explicitly connected to how you physically show up in your body in the world in
Mm-hmm.
a way that I'm very glad is made consequential in Zelu's life. Like we
Yeah.
get to see, like when people care about you, they're not caring about you in the abstract
Mm-hmm.
in the course of these relationships. They're caring about you in all the ways they can definitely perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, they're really trying to contradict anything they can't perceive about it. So the way that Zelu feels about her life and feels about her decisions and feels about her body don't have the same kind of traction that people's ability to like see and interact with her physically
Mm.
are meaningful. And I think like, oh my gosh, it seems like the robots, it's you would expect the robots would live in a way where that was so inconsequential, where the way
Oh.
that your physical
Mm-hmm.
body functions is like so human, so retrograde, but it's really not. They're
Mm-hmm.
profoundly concerned with it in these ways that you know, when you see this gathering of them toward the end of the novel when they're trying to decide what to do about and how to deal with the chargers, there's this diversity of ways their robot bodies all show up for the
Mm-hmm.
ones who have
Mm-hmm.
bodies, and they're all different shapes and all different sizes,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them are like humanoid but really big
Mm-hmm.
or like have a kind of anatomy that animals have, but they don't use it the same way because they're not biological. All of those, like all the things that you can reckon with through having a body,
Mm-hmm.
whether it stays the same or changes, that stuff is really meaningful interpersonally and interrobotically, I guess,
Yeah.
in this way that I really appreciate, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like is I feel like we'd lose something if there was a level of like going full post embodied, post human, not attached to physical presence. If we went in that direction, I would feel like I was like I couldn't
Yeah.
get,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't serve the purposes, it wouldn't serve the interests that I felt were served by all
Mm-hmm.
the embodied stuff in the novel, and so I'm glad it didn't fully go that direction.
And just to build on one thing, and that, and not even just that they're in different bodies, but that
Mm-hmm.
there's pleasure, and there's
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
like like just being in the sun, or like the pollen tsunamis, and like there's this feeling of
Yeah.
like really enjoying the earth and enjoying being in your body that is great, that you might not expect from
Yeah.
robots. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was so fascinating. I love that. That of course that's one of the things about having a body that robots would be into.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, oh, well, if your body's made of metal, what kind of metal? Like, and if your body has senses, what do you perceive with those senses? Um, that is really grounding in a way. And it's one of the, you know, I like robot stories that involve that. Are we at a inflection point? Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. I'm gonna grab a drink of water, and then I'll be right back. All right, we are back. We are still talking about Death of the Author / Rusted Robots. And oh, you know, I forgot. I wanted to say this at some point, so I'm going to say this now. This is the most physically beautiful book I have bought in quite some time. I was really impressed with it. I had, I think, I want to say I pre-ordered it, and like forgot about it, and then it got an email from my bookstore like, oh, it's in. I was like, oh, cool, because it has the cover, and then you take the cover off, and it has the rusted robots, and it also has like, it has really beautiful end papers, and it's just, yeah, it's a gorgeous design with like this whole secret layer to it when you take the dust jacket off. So that's cool.
I love that. It's something that I'm used to from comics. That
Oh.
comics so often have, you know, variant covers that are
Mm-hmm.
their own kind of event, and even like within them, the idea that you see the variant cover edition and maybe it includes the cover on the mass market edition, or you look across the several of them. I like that a lot. And it reminds me that, you know, we encounter science fiction books and the people who write them and the market they operate in some ways, we hold them to the same standards and expectations that we do for like so-called literary fiction,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the settings that that Zelu is in at the beginning of the novel, where people are in writing workshops. They're all hoping to succeed in the same sort of mainstream way and learning
Mm-hmm.
the same lessons that people have been taught over recent years. But the world in which whatever they write will emerge will have all kinds of like particular contingent rules and market constraints that they don't know,
Mm.
they're not prepared for. And I feel like, oh yeah, comics gets that, or people who
Hmm.
work in that sector get it, and they see like the place of the book in the market as a physical object.
Mm-hmm.
When I see, fiction that's published that way, where there's attention to how the book looks physically, people always care about how books look physically. But when I see that attention being applied in the ways it was for this book, I was like, oh, wow, cool. This book is sort of living in the world in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I feel like a lot of readers who would be interested can feel gratified by, that
Mm-hmm.
it was published with a certain degree of care
Yeah.
for people's awareness of like, what are we getting when we open up this book? Oh, surprise. We're interested in what you think you're getting when you open up this
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, stepping back from this, like, Okorafor's like agents, editors, publishers, designers, like, yeah, they really went all out on this, took a big swing, which I really just appreciate that. But I want to talk about, we said a couple points here before we wrap up. And one thing, again, I feel like I've bracketed all my discussion of this book with things that kind of like bug me or sticking with me, or I don't quite know what to make of. But one of them is, so this book has a bunch of really interesting things, especially related to sort of assistive technology that I feel like with this book coming out now in 2025, just kind of read oddly and almost sort of like unfairly. I'm putting them up against things going on in the current world. So
Yeah.
a big part of this book early on is Zelu figuring out that she can use self-driving cars to get around. And it's like this huge thing for her. And like
Yeah.
her mom's scared of it, and like other people she meet are scared. I mean, she's scared of it the first time, but then she embraces it. But just like that's transformative for her and how she can get around the city. And then her boyfriend partner
Yeah.
makes this AI app that it's not like in your face. It doesn't seem like it's like talking to her all the time, but just it seems like a really good AI app on her phone that she can ask to do things. And it is very useful. Like there's a couple like critical scenes where because she has that, things go a lot better for her. And then obviously there's the exoskeleton legs that she gets, which are like these particularly, they felt a little like maybe I wrote in my notes like kind of like MCU coded in how they work,
Yeah.
but they're not far away at all, right? Like they're experimenting with this level of stuff right now. There's some people already using stuff not too far off from this, which is
Yeah.
cool. But anyways, back to the car, back to the AI, and then she befriends this kind of billionaire guy and goes to space at the end of the novel on like a private space flight. And all three of those things are interesting and wild, and they're science fictional and they're real today, which makes them exciting.
Yeah.
They're really interested in terms of like assistive technology changing the way people can get around in the world. They're also tied to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and like it feels really weird and strange to be reading these right now when I feel like my skepticism for AI is like through the roof. You know, my skepticism of private space companies and people that are making self-driving cars is really high,
Yeah.
and it's a
Yeah.
weird thing. And I don't know, I don't know how long ago Okorafor started drafting this. I have no idea that context, but it's a strange thing to be sitting side by side with it, because again, I think considered separately from the
Yeah.
politics, all three of those are really interesting technologies.
Yeah, and I think that the way that they occur within Zelu's life as options, as possibilities, it's a nice level on which to encounter them, and I think a very familiar level for science fiction readers to encounter them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that writing, near future science fiction like this is really challenging, has got to be
Mm-hmm.
really challenging because
Mm-hmm.
we're living in a dystopia today,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's always hard to show people, like to hand back to us the things that we're putting into our present and future right now
Mm-hmm.
as if they're narrative devices or as if they're, tropes that we're encouraged to think creatively about,
Yeah, right.
when like the real thing is right there down the street. Like we could
Mm-hmm.
call him right now. And so seeing those things show up, what I most appreciated and what I most struggled with was how they manifested in Zelu's life as choices. And they're choices that sort of successively open up for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like, oh, this AI assistant that her partner creates and sort of tests out with her, it's seems really cool and it takes
Mm-hmm.
on this entirely benign place in her life. And I think, oh yeah, there are people for whom their relationship to those kinds of things is largely unproblematic,
Mm-hmm.
and people for whom they're designed and they work for them all the time. And I'm like, that must be nice. What is
Mm-hmm.
that like?
Right.
And it just seems incredibly unlikely and uncommon in the world today that a person whose day-to-day struggles are at all relatable to mine would have an unproblematic or a
Mm-hmm.
benign relationship to tools like that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, that's the fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fantasy
Mm-hmm.
is that if this stuff works for the ideal candidate that the prototype is designed for, I'm very skeptical about that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that person is like most different from me socially.
Mm-hmm.
But in this novel, I'm seeing it happen in the life of someone for whom it's being put into practice with the exoskeleton and with the AI assistant. They're working so well for her because they're designed for her and they're
Mm-hmm.
improved for her and they adapt to her. And I think, oh yeah, that would be really cool. And usually it's the stories that are set far in the future after all the bugs have been worked out where stuff
Yeah.
works like that. And
Mm-hmm.
in this case, it's a version of those things coming online and being tested out for the first time, where instead of being as disastrous as we see them in real life,
Mm-hmm.
they're actually quite helpful. That seems very much worth exploring and fantasizing about. Like, what if
Mm-hmm.
stuff worked?
Yeah.
Like, it hands us back this reality of like self-driving cars. What if they did the things they promised to do and
Mm-hmm.
didn't cause wrecks and drive up
Yeah.
insurance premiums and
Uh-huh.
all of these problems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Like these are technologies with practical and utopian applications.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's just so obscure. I mean, I think about like AI all the time right now, like because AI is being used to decimate the arts and humanities and intellectual labor while raising the oceans. I think a lot of us are very rightly upset about it, but there's a lot of ways that machine learning and automated things are obviously super cool and are going to have tons of like great applications. Yeah, I don't know. It is nice to have that fantasy of them working in a good way. I was thinking of none of these examples are quite as bad, but I was thinking of Robinson putting Bitcoin in the Ministry for the Future as like a positive
yeah,
thing, and then like
yeah.
three months after it comes out, we're all like, oh no, whoops.
Yeah, and that I think is kind of it's the thing that we are supposed to as a society say science fiction writers are allowed to do and encouraged to
Mm,
do. But then, when real life messes up the thing that science fiction writers were supposed to be doing for us, I'm like, well, I can't blame them. I can certainly blame the tech bros who
mm,
promised
mm-hmm,
who promised all of that stuff and have never really read a whole book. Like, I,
mm-hmm.
I blame them.
We were talking on the break really quickly. You'd also want to talk a little bit about some of the cultural context of
Absolutely,
just like
yeah.
Zilu's family, like the Igbo Yoruba kind of framework,
Yeah,
or
yeah, it was really significant, I think, that we get from the beginning a sense that Zelu's family being, a cross-cultural kind of blended family is really important to her life. And, you know, sad things happen in the novel. We've spoiled a bunch of things. A
mm-hmm,
member of her family dies, and one of the big conflicts. There's the conflict of like, her living with her family members and like their cultural backgrounds don't cause or like don't precipitate a whole lot of conflict within her day-to-day life, except interpersonally there are lots of conflicting priorities she has for herself and her family
mm-hmm,
members have. But when someone dies, of course, that's when like all of your cultural community's rules go into effect around like marriage and children being born and death.
mm-hmm,
And the way that those things show up early in the novel and the way that they show up late are
mm-hmm.
around these big defining circumstances. And I appreciated that as much as I also felt like it's so heart wrenching when something as decisive as where is a person going to be buried?
Yeah,
What does that mean for
mm-hmm,
the living? What does that mean for the living when they die? Those
mm-hmm,
kinds of things are so powerfully overdetermined by where we come from and
mm-hmm,
how we relate to each other that like it's awful and it's one of the things that makes the dying part of death awful
mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
that it really carries with it like, oh, now these things that we've learned to live with, if you're not living anymore, all the things about how you learn to live with it don't apply.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a moment at which I saw Zelu's mother dealing with her father's side of the family in like some of the most heart-wrenching and sympathetic ways, and in ways where I think as a reader, you saw Zelu stepping back and perceiving things and
Mm-hmm.
seeing things that she didn't expect or hadn't really thought about that had shaped her mother's role in her life and the significance of where she comes from really profoundly. And I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah.
It must be something meaningful for Nigerian readers to relate to, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something meaningful I think for anybody whose parents come from different backgrounds to relate to, because you don't know what to do when those big moments arise,
Mm-hmm.
because it upsets everything that you have learned to live with in the meantime.
One of the things we've talked about in this book a little bit is that movement from kind of mythic, kind of abstract, or maybe this sort of like
Yeah.
intentionally exaggerated kind of wish fulfillment kind of things, but then back to like grounded, back to really bodily. And some of the scenes that jumped out a lot for me, besides the specific family scenes around like when they're deciding what to do with the funeral and like some of the specific scenes like in the room with other family, was how grounded and fleshed out like the extended family felt,
Yeah.
where you would meet like these like aunts and uncles who haven't entered the narrative before, but you're meeting them and they just felt like really whole characters and
Yeah.
would fill in just enough of some of the background. And even though like you don't know a ton of who they are, what they do, you get this sense of how they relate to each other. That was one of those really grounded spots in the book. 'Cause that's like the back, I don't know, the back two-thirds, back three-quarters. You get a lot of that where Zelu's kind of been like floating in this sort of what is my life now? I'm rich and famous. I'm
Yeah.
figuring things out. And then really like not like they're not good events, right? Like dealing with the death of a loved one and all that stuff, but really grounded and really there in a way that I dug.
Yeah, there are, the loss within her family that she experiences, which, both part of the what does this all mean, that the cards are sort of on the table, or the cards have been dealt at the beginning of the novel. Some of that comes back at the end in important
Mm-hmm.
ways, but in another way it seems like, oh yeah, this is kind of a natural, everybody has to deal with this thing, that you age and your life
Mm-hmm.
progresses in whatever way and your
Mm-hmm.
parents are not around forever. And when that happens, seeing that some things that have been ancillary to her life become really profound, like people are present who are usually thousands of miles away,
Mm-hmm.
that's really meaningful. In, I think, like the last third or so of the novel, when Zelu goes to Nigeria and experiences some traumatic stuff, but also as she's world famous, the way that people relate to her changes, and
Mm-hmm.
people in her life keep saying to her, they're talking about this even in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about this, oh, and these things that happened to you, how could you conduct yourself in this way? You're not in the US where you've been living. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going into space where all bets are off. You're in Nigeria and this is what you should expect. I really appreciated that the starkness of that was something that Zelu struggled with intensely,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's as important as, stuff that we might see in terms of her personality as an individual or her choices in life. That some of this stuff is those cards that are dealt from the beginning. That the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances that her parents are in, having, a family that is international and having connections internationally that persist in her life, they're just things that she's going to deal with, whether she's the world famous author or not, whether
Mm-hmm.
she chooses to get the exoskeleton or not. That how she deals with them, I'm like, oh, okay, how do I line this up with my sense of this character, for whom other things I chalk up to her as an individual? She's a very strong personality. But
Mm-hmm.
then some of this stuff I see, oh, wow, there's no level of individual difference, personality, that takes these issues off the table
Mm-hmm.
when you have to deal with them.
Yeah, there's never a point where the narrator like stares at the camera and is like, "Here's what
Yeah,
I think about immigration status versus dual
yeah,
identity." But like through that whole thing of like being both Nigerian and American, kind of like simultaneously,
yeah,
is in every chapter. It's
yeah.
constantly coming up, and it's really well done.
It's a, the death of the author thing is that, it's as if there is not a person in the world external to whoever lived the
Mm,
life and wrote this book. But those are some moments at which I think, oh, this is when Nnedi Okorafor, the author who's Nigerian and works in the US, is least present as a personal real life individual,
hmm.
because she's had to invent a person
Hmm.
going through this
Mm-hmm.
who can't be herself. And that's it's a representation that I think other times, other kinds of narratives, I take for granted. Oh, maybe this is a little bit about her. Maybe this is, of course, this is a thing she knows from experience, but this is
Mm-hmm.
like, maybe this is a little bit of a feeling she's felt in life.
Mm-hmm.
But there are these moments that happen in the novel where I'm like, oh, this must be something she has put there to get me as a reader to stop thinking about her as a person in the world and start
Mm-hmm.
thinking of a kind of person who could live in a kind of historical situation that is a real one.
Hmm. That's good. We should think about wrapping this up, I guess.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we didn't even really get in. I love hashing out genre taxonomies because I think there's never a final answer, so you can argue about it forever. But
No, never.
we didn't even get into that too much. But that I'll leave it as an exercise to the reader. You can think a lot
Yeah.
about whether this book is science fiction or not. Before we get going, I was wondering if there was anything you wanted to share about anything you're working on or have coming up where people can find you.
People can find me on Blue Sky. For now, that seems like a healthy enough place to have social media. andré.carrington.bluesky.social. And they can find me on Instagram a little bit at audio.futurism.
Cool.
Sometime soon enough, maybe within a year from now, my book by that title will be in the world, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Very cool. I'm super excited that what I don't want to go on too long, but I'm very curious. What's the research process been like for that? Have you been listening to tons and tons of cool stuff, I assume?
Yeah, I listened to a good amount of the, classic radio drama from like the 1940s and 50s, and I listened to actually a fair amount of BBC radio drama, which is a
Hmm.
very ongoing, continuing enterprise that new authors have their works adapted for BBC radio dramas, and lots of British actors who we see in movies and TV
Mm-hmm.
do audio drama, and that's been really fun and fascinating. And likewise, I've read about how things are received
Hmm.
by the public on
Mm-hmm.
radio and the role that radio has played in American life, especially, which has all been really enlightening and which my students are probably going to get tired of hearing about.
No, I'm really fascinated that I'm hoping when the book comes out that some of the audio will be discoverable so we can track it down.
Yeah, I can tell you a lot of it is.
Cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Thanks for pushing me to read this book. This was a fun conversation.
Thank you.
Hope to run into you again sometime, and I hope everything goes well with the book.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
A Meal of Thorns is a podcast from the Ancillary Review of Books, an online magazine founded to address the radical possibilities of criticism with a focus on speculative fiction, world literature, and utopian impulses. Go to ancillaryreviewofbooks.org for regular reviews, essays, interviews, and more. Our opening poem is by Barcha Hari, translated by John Bruff. Our music is by Giselle Gabriel Garcia. Our artwork is by Rob Patterson at The Ratio Farm. Thanks to our human transcribers, Kate Dollarhyde and John W.M. Thompson. They are diligently working on getting us caught up on our transcriptions. If you'd like to support the podcast and the Ancillary Review of Books, that is rad. A few different ways you can do that. Join our Patreon. A couple dollars a month really moves us towards our sustainability and contributor paying goals. You can hang out with us on Discord, and we've got a couple other goodies in the works. If you're interested in a book we mention, buying from the bookshop link in our show notes or at the ARB website gets us a cut, and it helps us immensely if you just help get the word out about the show. Leaving us a review, commenting, or sharing on your platform of choice, that really helps. And it's nice to know you're listening. Questions, suggestions, pedantic notes about things we got wrong? Drop us an email at mealofthorns@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Blue Sky for periodic skeets, I guess. Did that term stick? Okay, folks, as this episode is being released, I am hopefully on my way home from 4th Street Fantasy. Did I have a good time? I don't know. I hope so. Message in a bottle here. My plan is to put together a special episode about 4th Street, so that'll be coming next time. But after that, we've got an episode with Arkady Martine on C.J. Cherry's 40,000 in Gehenna, one of the best to ever do it. Got some more con special episodes coming. Got some more good books and guests on the list. Check the website if you want to read ahead. Sending you solidarity. Stay critical out there.